that Lord Mercy was taking in all this information and clearly recognized the problems. It was getting more and more towards criminal negligence.
The Titanic is remembered as the unsinkable ship that never finished its first journey. But the real story is far stranger than the headlines. Behind the luxury suites and grand staircase were overlooked choices, haunting coincidences, and small details that made all the difference. From locked gates that shaped survival to an unusual passenger who earned an unforgettable nickname, each fact reveals something surprising about that night. These aren't the stories told in movies. These are the details you probably missed. Number 50. The unsinkable myth. Contrary to popular belief, the Titanic was never officially advertised as unsinkable. The phrase came from promotional materials that described it as practically unsinkable, based on its advanced watertight compartments and safety design. This hubris probably determined the number of lifeboats and much of the design for emergency drills. It was so strongly believed that, when disaster struck, it became one of the most hauntingly symbolic markers of human arrogance. Keep your curiosity alive, because the next detail shows the disaster may have started days before the iceberg ever appeared. Number 49. The coal fire. Hidden deep in one of the Titanic's coal bunkers was a fire that had been burning even before the ship left Southampton. Coal fires weren't unusual on steamships, but this one proved difficult to fully extinguish. However, several historians theorize that the most terrific temperatures might have weakened some portions of the steel hull in the places close to those in which the iceberg struck. While official inquiries belittled its contribution, the smoldering fire has prompted the speculation that the Titanic's fate was all but sealed long before the iceberg appeared on the horizon. Number 48. The missing binoculars. The lookouts in the Titanic's crow's nest had no binoculars the night the ship struck the iceberg. The key to the locker that stored them had been accidentally taken ashore by a reassigned officer, David Blair. With their bare eyes, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee were looking at the inky horizon without the aid of any magnification. Fleet would later testify that binoculars would have given him a much-needed second's warning. Number 47. Lifeboats for half the people. Titanic carried just 20 lifeboats, enough for about 1,178 people, though more than 2,200 were aboard. Shockingly, this still exceeded maritime regulations at the time, which were based on ship tonnage rather than passenger capacity. Far from being a vessel designed for double safety requirements, concerns arose that extra lifeboats would make for cluttered and drab-looking decks. When the catastrophe struck, hundreds of vacancies were caused by half-empty lifeboats. Number 46. First-class gym oddities. Titanic's first-class gymnasium was a marvel of early 20th century luxury. Passengers could try out unusual equipment like a mechanical camel and an electric horse, alongside rowing machines, bicycles, and a squash court. To create a gym similar to the fashionable trends of the moment, one will be limited to supervision under the professional trainer Thomas W. Macaulay, who offers tuition for a price. Very few ships had such provisions back then. Hence, it shows the rich legacy of the Titanic, combining luxury and ingenuity. Number 45. The band played on. One of Titanic's most enduring legends is the ship's 8 musicians who played as the vessel sank. Survivors recalled hearing soothing tunes meant to calm panic. Though accounts differ on the final song, some swore it was "Nearer, My God, to Thee," while others insisted on "Autumn." Nonetheless, that night witnessed the demise of all 8 band members who carried on with the work despite the evolving chaos. Number 44. The Californian nearby. The SS Californian was less than 20 miles from the Titanic when the disaster unfolded, yet it never came to the rescue. Its wireless operator had gone to bed, so distress calls went unheard. Crew on deck even spotted Titanic's rockets, but misinterpreted them as company signals or celebrations. Before the Californian figured out what had actually happened, Carpathia was already rescuing the survivors. This failure would be with Stanley Lord, captain of the ship, forever. Number 43. The near collision at departure. Titanic's maiden voyage nearly ended before it began. As the massive liner left Southampton on April 10, 1912, its enormous displacement created a suction effect that pulled the nearby steamer SS New York from its moorings. The ropes broke. The smaller ship now drifted dangerously near the Titanic's side. Only the prompt action of tugboats and the Titanic's engines averted a collision. The situation was delayed. Spectators murmured, considering it an ill omen that would portend misfortune. Number 42. The first ice warnings ignored. Throughout April 14, 1912, the Titanic's wireless room received multiple iceberg warnings from nearby ships. At least 7 urgent messages reported dangerous ice fields directly in her path. Yet many of these warnings never reached the bridge, either delayed by passenger telegrams or dismissed as routine. In the eventide, the final very important message on the Californian was paid little importance to. Later, when the Titanic rammed against an iceberg, the unheeded warnings began hauntingly to remind us of how mankind added to the natural peril that night. Number 41. The ship's cat that vanished. Like most ocean liners of the era, Titanic had a ship's cat named Jenny to control rats and mice. She had recently given birth to kittens and was a familiar sight to crew and stewards. Jenny and her kittens, however, went ashore moments before the ship's maiden voyage, as attested by a stoker who allegedly stated that she seemed to be restless. Some interpret this as cat instinct, whereby she sensed danger. Number 40. The third-class gates. Titanic's third-class passengers, many of them immigrants bound for America, were housed deep below decks in crowded quarters. Regulations required physical barriers between classes to prevent the spread of disease, so gates and locked doors restricted their movement. The onboard situation destructed into hurly-burly at the time of its sinking, making these barriers a total breakdown for many to reach the lifeboats located in the upper decks. Although crew members later opened a few other pathways, total confusion and wasted time may have proven fatal. The survival rate for the third class was lowest, a lingering reminder of the inequality between classes. Number 39. The millionaire's boat refusal. Wealthy industrialist Benjamin Guggenheim famously declined a seat in the lifeboats. After helping women and children board, he returned to his cabin, changed into evening dress, and reappeared on deck with his valet. Guggenheim reportedly told others they were prepared to go down like gentlemen. Survivors report that he was seated in a chair, sipping brandy and smoking a cigar as chaos erupted around him. With one last act of dignified valor, he became one of the heroic figures associated with the Titanic. Number 38. The unsinkable passenger. Margaret Molly Brown earned her famous nickname after showing extraordinary courage during the sinking. Born into modest circumstances, she had become wealthy through marriage but never lost her sharp wit and fierce determination. When they finally boarded lifeboat number 6, Brown urged the crew members to return for more survivors and even took an oar herself with which to help row through the icy waters. Her leadership, together with her insistence on saving others, made her a legend who would go down in infamy as the unsinkable Molly Brown. Number 37. The rivalry of shipbuilders. The Titanic was built as part of White Star Line's response to Cunard Line's dominance in luxury travel. Cunard's Lusitania and Mauretania were celebrated for their speed and modern design, so White Star aimed to outshine them with sheer size, comfort, and opulence. The rivalry was not with record timings, but with prestige lure for wealthy travelers aboard unheard-of luxury. The competitive spirit of the rivalry drove the builders of the Titanic to the extreme of designing the largest ship afloat. Number 36. The wireless chaos. Titanic's Marconi wireless room buzzed constantly, but much of the traffic wasn't safety-related. Wealthy passengers eagerly sent personal messages to friends and business partners ashore, overwhelming the two operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. Much of it was left unattended or postponed, while passenger telegrams continued to arrive as warnings of icebergs. One late and critical message from the Californian, also reporting nearby ice, was dismissed rather curtly when Phillips snapped back, "Shut up, I'm busy." Costly and disorganized, this left the ship very poorly informed. Number 35. The coldest possible night. The night the Titanic struck the iceberg was eerily calm and bitterly cold. With no wind and no moon, the sea was like glass, making icebergs nearly impossible to spot until dangerously close. Usually, waves breaking against the ice would reveal their outlines, but that night, the ocean gave no such indication. Temperatures were just above freezing, and the water itself was about 28 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 2 degrees below 0 Celsius. Number 34. A captain's strange silence. Captain Edward J. Smith, a veteran mariner on his final voyage before retirement, made surprisingly few direct orders once Titanic struck the iceberg. Survivors recalled confusion among the crew, with officers largely left to interpret his intentions. While one view alleges that Smith was shocked by the extent of the calamity, another view propounds that he trusted his officers to act. His presence in silence remains under controversy to incite further debate as to whether indecision caused loss of lives or whether the tragedy had gone beyond the control of any captain anyway. Number 33. The empty seats in lifeboats. Perhaps the most haunting detail of the Titanic's evacuation was how many lifeboats were launched half-empty. Though designed to carry 65 people, some boats left with barely 24 aboard. Officers feared that overloading might snap the fragile wooden craft during lowering, and panic on deck pressured them to launch quickly. In all that mayhem, it left behind hundreds of possible survivors. The carried empty seats bobbed in the water when the ship slipped under the surface. Number 32. The first SOS in history. Titanic's distress calls marked one of the first major uses of the SOS signal at sea. Before 1909, the standard call was CQD, meaning "Come Quick, Distress." During the sinking, operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride sent both codes to ensure other ships would understand. Bride later jested grimly that this was Phillips's chance for sending SOS, as it was still new. Signals thus received ships hundreds of miles away, but of course, none was so near as to prevent disaster in the first place. Number 31. The distress rockets misread. As the Titanic sank, crew members fired white rockets into the night sky, hoping to attract nearby ships. The SS Californian's crew spotted the flares, but misinterpreted them. Without the context of wireless messages, they assumed the lights were company signals or even festive displays from a passenger liner. The time the truth was understood, intervention lay buried in the realm of impossibilities. Number 30. The ship's orchestra's fate. Titanic's orchestra, led by Wallace Hartley, became legendary for playing music as the ship went down. The 8 musicians, employed by an agency rather than directly by the ship, weren't considered crew or passengers, which complicated insurance claims after their deaths. None escaped the vessel, but their valor served as a solace for many in the tumult of the scenario. Their story won the world's admiration, a symbol of serenity in the midst of calamity. Number 29. The baker who survived. Chief Baker Charles Jokin became one of Titanic's most unlikely survivors. Known for his heavy drinking, Jokin admitted he'd consumed a substantial amount of alcohol the night the ship sank. After he assisted in loading the lifeboats, he hung on to the rails until he saw the Titanic go down before drifting away in the freezing Atlantic for nearly 2 hours. He was lucky to survive, and he later said that alcohol was warming and calming. Number 28. The mail clerk's sacrifice. Titanic carried over 3,000 sacks of mail, including registered letters and valuable parcels. When the ship began flooding, 5 postal clerks, Americans and Britons alike, rushed to save the mailroom. Witnesses later recalled seeing them waist-deep in icy water, dragging heavy bags toward higher decks in a desperate attempt to protect their cargo. Somehow, nothing survived except the memories of the resolution to guard the mail. Number 27. The Women and Children First Rule. The principle of women and children first was famously enforced aboard the Titanic, but not always consistently. On the starboard side, First Officer Murdoch allowed some men to board when space remained, while on the port side, Second Officer Lightoller strictly barred them, even if boats left half full. Survival rates were greatly influenced by this disparity in enforcement. Almost all first-class women and children survived, but a great number of steerage families were separated, with fathers left behind. Number 26. The Countess Who Stayed. Among Titanic's wealthiest passengers was Anne Isham, often referred to as a countess, who reportedly refused to board a lifeboat without her beloved Great Dane. When the crew denied the dog entry, she chose to stay behind. Some days later, members of the crew of the rescue ship claimed to have seen the body of a woman floating in the Atlantic, still holding a large dog. Although this was never confirmed, the story lives on as one of the heart-wrenching examples of loyalty. That story of devotion was tragic, but the next one shows how some dogs beat the odds. Number 25. The Dogs That Survived. Despite the Titanic's tragedy, 3 dogs did manage to survive. All were small breeds, 2 Pomeranians and 1 Pekingese, belonging to wealthy first-class passengers, compact in size so that they can be easily carried into lifeboats instead of protesting. Larger dogs like Newfoundlands, Great Danes, Retrievers, and others are left behind in the kennel. Number 24. The Smoking Room Farewell. As the Titanic's end drew near, several first-class gentlemen reportedly gathered in the opulent smoking room rather than scramble for lifeboats. Dressed in evening clothes, they calmly sipped brandy and smoked cigars, embracing dignity in the face of disaster. The witnesses have stated that one of the men said they'd die as gentlemen should. The place has arrived to become this haunting symbol of class, courage, and resignation. Number 23. The Titanic Orphans. Among Titanic's most poignant stories were 2 young French boys, Michel and Edmond Navratil. Their father, traveling under an alias, had abducted them from their mother in France, planning to start a new life in America. Before the ship sank, he put the boys in a lifeboat, but he died with the ship. The children did not speak English and were known simply as Titanic orphans for weeks until their mother identified their photographs in newspapers. Number 22. The Ship's Final Break. For decades, survivors gave conflicting accounts about whether the Titanic sank intact or broke apart. Some swore they saw the stern lift high before snapping, while others insisted the ship slid down whole. Official inquiries sided with the latter, dismissing breakup reports. So the debate ceased in 1985 when the wreck was discovered in 2 large sections on the seabed, resting 1,970 feet apart. The separation was violent, scattering debris over many miles and supporting the case of the ship breaking up before disappearing beneath the waves. Number 21. The lights stayed on. One of the Titanic's unsung acts of heroism came from her engineers and electricians. As the ship flooded, they remained below decks, working tirelessly to keep the dynamos running. Thanks to their efforts, the lights burned until just minutes before the final plunge, allowing passengers to see while boarding lifeboats. In most wrecks, darkness caused panic in the victims it brought. The Titanic provided light, however, to precious order. No member of the engineering crew survived. Number 20. The heroic Marconi operators. Titanic's wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, worked relentlessly as the ship sank. Despite exhaustion and freezing conditions, they sent out distress calls for nearly 2 hours, reaching ships hundreds of miles away. Phillips endured until the sea intruded into the cabin, whereas Bride managed to escape with some difficulty and later assisted in getting aboard a lifeboat. Their efforts brought the Carpathia to the place of tragedy, thus saving more than 700 people from death. Number 19. The band leader's loyalty. Violinist Wallace Hartley, leader of the Titanic's band, became a symbol of courage through his loyalty to his fellow musicians. Offered the chance to board a lifeboat, he reportedly declined, choosing instead to stay and continue playing. As chaos reigned around him, survivors spoke of Hartley as seeming quite calm, with a bow in his hand. Hartley's body was found wearing his bandmaster's clothes, while the violin was eventually handed to his fiancée. His refusal to leave his position was what sealed his status among the true heroes of the Titanic. Number 18. The captain's final moments. Captain Edward Smith's fate remains shrouded in mystery, with conflicting accounts from survivors. Some claimed he retreated to the wheelhouse and went down with his ship, a stoic captain to the end. Others reported seeing him leap into the sea, swimming toward overturned lifeboats before vanishing. No certainties were arrived at during the official investigation, and no body was retrieved. On the bridge or in the depths of the glacial waters, Smith's last moments became a symbol of tragedy and unanswered questions surrounding the Titanic. Number 17. The millionaire who survived. John Jacob Astor IV, one of the wealthiest men in the world, was aboard the Titanic with his young, pregnant wife, Madeleine Harrison. After ensuring she secured a seat in lifeboat number 4, Astor reportedly asked if he might accompany her, citing her condition, but was denied. Witnesses claim to have seen him on deck, casually smoking a cigarette. His body was found later, with cash in thousands. Madeleine survived to give birth months later, whereas Astor became a synecdoche for wealth humbled by tragedy. Number 16. The unsinkable stewardess. Violet Jessup, a stewardess and nurse, astonishingly survived 3 major maritime disasters. She was aboard the Titanic the night it struck the iceberg and escaped in Lifeboat 16, even caring for a baby placed in her arms. Quite a few years back, she had been traveling on the Titanic's twin, the Olympic, during its collision with a naval vessel. Years later, during World War I, she survived the sinking of the Britannic when it hit a mine. Her great fortune later gave her the name Miss Unsinkable, a living legend of survival. Number 15. The Californian's radio silence. The SS Californian, the ship closest to the Titanic that night, had only one wireless operator, Cyril Evans. After sending ice warnings earlier, he switched off his set around midnight and went to bed. Just minutes later, the Titanic struck the iceberg. The distress calls were made and went unheard in the wee hours while Evans was asleep. Although the crew of the Californian had seen rockets in the sky, they were never to investigate. Thus, this ill-fated lapse of communication kept a ship that could have saved hundreds steady till dawn. Number 14. The Carpathia's race. When Titanic's distress calls reached the RMS Carpathia, Captain Arthur Rostron immediately ordered a course change. His crew sprang into action, preparing lifeboats, blankets, and hot drinks for survivors. Despite dangerous ice fields, Rostron pushed his ship at full speed, exceeding its rated capacity. After nearly 4 hours, Carpathia arrived to find Titanic gone and only lifeboats adrift. The crew rescued 705 survivors, becoming heroes in their own lives. Rostron later received honors from both Britain and the United States for his courage. Number 13. The iceberg's journey. The iceberg that doomed the Titanic likely began its journey years earlier, calving from a Greenland glacier around 1909. Slowly carried southward by ocean currents, it drifted thousands of miles before reaching the busy North Atlantic shipping lanes in April 1912. Then, there was an unprecedented level of ice that year, with reports of bergs much further south than usual. Several million tons of water were weighed after the Titanic crashed into the iceberg. Tragic timing. It had traveled for years just to meet the ship's course. Number 12. The Wreck Commissioner's Inquiry. In the aftermath of the sinking, Britain launched the Wreck Commissioner's Inquiry, led by Lord Mersey. Spanning weeks of testimony from survivors, crew, and experts, the investigation sought to uncover what went wrong. It ultimately blamed reckless navigation achieved at unsafe speed through treacherous waters and inadequate provision of lifeboats, but it has absolved White Star Line mostly from negligence. Critics have argued it's much too lenient, favoring the powerful interests. Nevertheless, its findings rewrote maritime law by imposing a 24-hour wireless watch requirement and ensuring sufficient lifeboats for each passenger on board. Number 11. The myth of the rich first. A common belief is that Titanic's wealthiest passengers were given priority, but survival statistics reveal a more complex picture. While most first-class women and children were saved, not all wealthy men survived. Figures like John Jacob Astor and Benjamin Guggenheim perished. The third-class passengers suffered the worst. Entire families lost due to language barriers, locked gates, and delayed access to lifeboats. On the other hand, reality is concealed by the myth of privilege. Life or death, it was hitherto less dependent on wealth than on gender, age, and location aboard the vessel. Number 10. The orchestra's instrument found. Wallace Hartley, Titanic's band leader, was recovered days after the sinking, still wearing his uniform. With him was a small leather case containing his violin, a gift from his fiancée. For decades, its authenticity was debated until forensic testing confirmed seawater corrosion and period engravings. In 2013, this violin went for auction and sold for more than $1.7 million, making it one of the most popular artifacts relating to the Titanic. It represents the courage of the band. Even as fear gripped all the people on board, they played to soothe them while the ship sank. Number 9. The Titanic's sister ship Fate. Titanic was part of the Olympic-class trio, alongside Olympic and Britannic. Ironically, Britannic, designed with improved safety features after Titanic's sinking, also met a tragic end. In 1916, while on duty as a hospital ship during World War I, she struck a mine in the Aegean Sea and sank within 55 minutes, faster than the Titanic. Most on board, however, survived due to much better lifeboat readiness. Olympic, meanwhile, continued to serve a long career, earning her the nickname Old Reliable. Lightning did strike twice in the case of Britannic. Number 8. The first movie about the Titanic. Just a month after the disaster, filmmakers rushed to dramatize the tragedy. The silent film Saved from the Titanic starred Dorothy Gibson, an actual survivor who wore the same clothes she escaped in during filming. The movie, released in May 1912, connected with audiences very directly and very raw. The only known prints of the film were later destroyed in a fire, but still photographs exist in equal numbers. Number 7. The Survivor Who Predicted It. 14 years before the Titanic sank, author Morgan Robertson wrote Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, a novella about a massive, unsinkable ship that strikes an iceberg in the North Atlantic. The fictional Titan was nearly identical in size and speed to the Titanic, and it too lacked enough lifeboats. The coincidences seemed to stun all of the readers after the disaster. Edition after edition of the book increased its notoriety. Although Robertson stated that it was a mere coincidence, the book became famous. The strange prophecies in it further fueled myths that someone had somehow foreseen the Titanic's fate. Number 6. The Rescue Ship Memorial. After Carpathia rescued Titanic's survivors, its crew became celebrated for their bravery. In gratitude, the surviving wireless operator, Harold Bride, and other supporters raised funds for a memorial to honor Carpathia's captain, Arthur Rostron, and his men. The monument was unveiled in 1915 in New York City, and it shows a heroic figure with arms stretched to symbolize deliverance. It stands as one of the few physical remembrances regarding the rescue ship's roles during the tragedy, reminding future generations of bravery amid catastrophe. Number 5. The wealth lost at sea. When the Titanic slipped beneath the waves, it carried enormous fortunes with it. Wealthy passengers brought jewelry, fine art, stocks, and even rare books on board. Much of it lost forever. John Jacob Astor alone was said to have carried thousands in cash. While divers have been recovering artifacts from the wreck, most personal treasures remain buried deep in the Atlantic as a final reminder of the luxury they formed part of. The ship's cargo included opulent goods like Persian rugs and cases of champagne. Number 4. The captain's iceberg joke. Just days before the Titanic struck the iceberg, Captain Edward Smith reportedly joked about his spotless record at sea. He remarked that in all his years of service, he had never been in an accident worth speaking about, and couldn't imagine anything sinking a modern ship. In versions, it has been said that he sketched even clearer concerns about icebergs, which were raised earlier on the journey. The comment, somehow casual as it may sound, chilled in retrospect. Within a few days, the ship forged unsinkable, and the captain, lauded for being so confident, faced the deadliest irony of all in history. Number 3. The last meal served. On the evening of April 14, 1912, Titanic's first-class passengers enjoyed an extravagant 10-course dinner. The menu included oysters, filet mignon, roasted squab, foie gras, and an array of fine wines and desserts. A banquet so glorious that it speaks of luxury on the seas, served in an elegant dining saloon beneath shimmering chandeliers. Just hours later, many of these diners would be scrambling through lifeboat hatches or looking at the icy Atlantic. The last meal was to be a haunting contrast to the fate that would follow. Number 2. The final message received. Titanic's last wireless message was sent shortly after 2 a.m. as water poured into the ship. Operator Jack Phillips tapped out frantic signals to any vessel within range, reporting that women and children were being put into boats. It was the sudden cutoff of his last transmission in the midst of a word. Given the apparent power failure of the ship, silence was to follow, proving, inarguably, the worst. There were ears on the distant ships to hear the echoes of the call, but none came in time. That unfinished message was, therefore, a macabre postscript to the saga of the Titanic. Hold on tight. This final detail shows how Titanic is still changing more than a century later. Number 1. The wreck's disappearing legacy. Discovered in 1985, the Titanic's wreck lies 2.5 miles beneath the Atlantic, but it is slowly vanishing. Iron-eating bacteria, nicknamed rusticles, are consuming the steel, while deep-sea currents and human expeditions accelerate the decay. Opinions vary, but some marine geological experts warn that a total collapse of the wreck might occur in a few decades, leaving only scattered debris. For now, the haunting remains of this ship stand as both a memorial and a time capsule. Its vanishing legacy, a reminder that even legends cannot resist the ocean. That's it for today's dive into Titanic's hidden details. If you learned something new, make sure to hit that like button and let us know your favorite fact in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss more stories like this. And if you're ready for another deep dive, go ahead and click the next video on your screen. We've got plenty more history and mysteries waiting for you.